Lord, I know I've been changed. Lord, I know I've been changed. Lord, I know I've been changed. The angels in the heaven done changed my name. You know, they say the people could fly back when they were on the African soil and were full of the power and the magic of that soil. Many had the gift of flight. Some, they say, even had wings. My father earned his living as a mailman. He served an ethnically diverse community which included retirees, graduate students, visiting researchers who were working or studying at the nearby University of Pennsylvania. Day after day, week in and week out, in bitter cold and oppressive heat, driving rainstorms and biting snows, my father rose at 4 a.m. so he could punch the clock at 5. And he'd turn often and say, "I'll never get used to getting up that early." My father always had an interest in understanding somebody else's human experience and in reaching out to them. So we often had people who were his customers on his route who were invited to our home for dinner and for fellowship with our family. So we met a lot of the people, and he really was more than a letter carrier. He was really a much bigger human being, and often went out on his own time to visit people. And I recall one occasion, a lot of times I used to go with him. My father was sort of my buddy, and on his days off, when I heard him, he got up so early to get to work that he still got up early on his days off. And when I heard him stirring, I would get up on the weekends. And often he'd go up to the corner restaurant and have a cup of coffee, and I'd have a bowl of cereal and listen to the guys solve the problems of the day. But we went once to visit a family, the Goswami family. The father was studying at the University of Pennsylvania. The mother did not speak English, and they had a 3-year-old who did the translating for the mother, would take her to the supermarket and translate for her. And she served us a dessert, a little treat. And having been taught by my father to be respectful, if someone offers you something, you take it, and you, even if it's distasteful, you eat it. And I took a bite into this. It was a very different taste, very different spices from our seasonings from what I was accustomed to. I was about 8 or 9, and I smiled politely and continued eating. And we came out, and he said, "Boy, did you eat that, Joe?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I slid mine into my pocket." But at night, after dinner dishes were washed, my father would disappear up in my parents' bedroom. And at a very early age, I began to go up into the room just to be in his presence. And I'd quietly crack the door open and slip inside and sit in the corner behind it. My father would be on the bed, propped up on pillows. His legs were bent, his thighs were his desk. He'd be reading and writing. And over time, he began reading things to me. My father had a passion for literature and understood the power of the spoken word. My father was very soft-spoken, even-tempered, never raised his voice, never put a hand on any of us, but really could be very passionate with pen and paper. And I remember reading as a kid once, one of those nights when I would sit in his room when he was writing. I said, "Well, look at this, Joe. I just got a letter from the editor from Time magazine." He'd written a letter to Time magazine about an error on the part of a reporter that changed the context of a situation. And apparently his letter was, at least that was the way I felt as a child, his letter was, it didn't get printed, but it was powerful enough to get the attention of the editor, and the editor wrote him a 1.5-page letter back. So a lot of my father's passion would come out in his writing. Keep your hand on the plow, hold on. My grandmother warned my mother, "Don't marry a dark man, because you won't have nothing but some dark children. And dark children have a hard row to hoe." Soon after I was born, my great aunt was overheard saying, "Oh, that certainly is an ugly baby. You're going to have to pay somebody good money to marry her." He did not like that, my mother said. After that, you became your father's baby. He picked you up and tucked you under his wing and carried you around like a little football. But still, my mother instructed me to pinch the bridge of my nose regularly so that it wouldn't be flat. And my fair-skinned grandmother complained every time she combed my hair. In this land of equal opportunity for all, a childhood chant summed up our status in America. If you're white, you're right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're black, get back. We were always told from the time we came into the world that we had to be better. In college, I went to a black college, and we were told in no uncertain terms that we bore a responsibility, that we had to be 10 times better than the average white person in order to be considered maybe equal. So we had to work our butts off in school, and often black colleges are regarded in this culture as something less than excellent, but you cannot go to a black college and sit around on your behind and not do anything. The professors will not allow that to happen. Keep your hand on the plow, hold on. In the midst of this, my father acknowledged and celebrated my presence in the universe and embraced all that I might become. He read out loud the works of Gwendolyn Brooks, Langston Hughes, James Baldwin. He spoke the words of each one of those writers as if they were pearls, and he cast them at my feet. Somewhere around the age of 7 or 8, he handed over to me the complete works of Paul Laurence Dunbar. No gold, bar, diamond, or ruby could have been any more precious to me. When he saw how quickly I memorized passages of poetry, he began to write monologues for me to recite, and encouraged me to find additional poems that I liked and memorize those as well. He wrote what became my signature piece at about 7 years old, Baby Brothers. Figuratively and also literally, this was a place where people lifted you up. We are just a few blocks from Union Baptist Church, which was the church that Marian Anderson attended. And the reason Marian Anderson was able to take music lessons was because every single person in that church went into their pockets and pocketbooks and pulled out their hard-earned nickels and dimes and quarters and paid for her music lessons because they wanted her to fly, and they were going to make sure that she did, and she did. Now, if my father lit the flame, the church fanned it. It was the church that provided arenas for the display of the talent abundant in black communities. And teas were often sponsored by one of the women's organizations in the church, the Pastor's Aid Society or the Ladies Auxiliary. And the program always included vocalists, instrumentalists, and some duets. While the Mistress of Ceremonies gave the standard introduction, we will now be favored with a reading by Miss Charlotte Blake. All right, Joe, this is it. Take your time. I rose and approached the front as I had been coached to do. Sometimes it's rather hard for me to get started. So while I'm thinking about how to begin, I'll just say good afternoon to you folks and introduce myself. My mother named me Charlotte. Grandmother calls me daughter. Daddy calls me baby. The kids call me skinny. So you can just call me anything, really, it doesn't matter. Some people hate laws and taxes, but I hate little boys. It is my personal belief that God made little boys for the same reason he made mosquitoes and worms. And the whole animal kingdom cries out against the existence of little male creatures known as boys. I finished the piece and flowed right into Dunbar. I never shall forget that night when Father hitched up Dobbin and all us youngsters clambered in and down the road went bobbing to school, where we was kept at work in every kind of weather, but where that night a spelling bee was calling us together. I rode the rest of that piece and finished, and the audience erupted, as they did for every child on the program. People said, "Oh, baby, that was so good. That was just so, you know, we used to learn learn it in our school. The children don't know nothing about that today. A woman came over and whispered in my ear, baby, that was so good. And she took my hand and squeezed $1 into it and closed my fingers around it. Another woman came and grabbed my face and pulled me into a big bosom hug. Oh, God bless you, honey. Just God bless you. You know God done give you a gift. He gonna make something out of you. Just you keep on keeping on. Just keep on keeping on. Well, in our church, we sang songs of a life after death, when we would receive our wings and dwell forever with the Almighty. But my father and the elders knew that amidst turmoil that would surely crush our spirits, it was in the here and now that we must be given wings and be taught to fly. Lord, I know I've been changed, Lord. I know I've been changed. The angels in the heaven done changed my name.